Welcome to Planet Possible News, where each month I'm joined by an environmental expert to explore issues that are making the headlines globally across water, nature and climate. And today we are joined by the MP for Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme and chair of the all-party parliamentary groups for water, floods and drought, and WASH, which is water and sanitation and hygiene, Lee Pitcher. And we'll be talking about the UK National Water Safety Campaign, the hidden human health costs of the decline of bees, and news that the UK government has set a target of an 87% cut in carbon emissions by 2042. So welcome to Planet Possible News, Lee. Great to have you back with us again.
It's really special to be back, Niki. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's kick off with a story that I know is really close to your heart, and it's about the UK's National Water Safety Campaign. So tell us more.
Sam Haycock, a 16-year-old, it was the day he finished his GCSEs, really hot day, and decided that they'd go out and celebrate. The way that they chose to do that was to go for a dip in a reservoir. Unfortunately, Sam never returned home that night. You know, we see what's happened over the last month. The weather's been beautiful, it's been hot, and unfortunately, we've seen 19 people, many of those children, young adults who have lost their lives. So what I'm asking for is a big national public awareness campaign into the risks and dangers of going swimming or entering open water courses unsupervised, because that's the biggest danger when they're unsupervised. It's just that period where you stop and think about the risks. So that national campaign I want to happen before children break up, because that is when we're expecting this year in particular it to be another really hot year. I just want to make sure that we protect as many children, young adults and others as possible.
We've seen a real growth in wild swimming, haven't we, over the last few years? There is an increased acceptability and normalcy, if you like, of people going into watercourses in particular. There's a kind of expectation that we should be able to swim in our rivers. How are you balancing that, Lee? Because this isn't about keeping people out of rivers in general, but it's an interesting sort of dilemma that's maybe a bit different to 30 years ago when we would have never thought about really swimming in a river.
This isn't about stopping fun. It's not about stopping sport or leisure around water. In fact, we know how valuable that is from a mental health point of view, from a physical health point of view. But it is about making sure that people have the knowledge, have the education, are aware of the risks. And in particular, Niki, it is about cold water shock and knowing what to do when you enter that water if your body suddenly starts to become almost paralysed, basically, by the cold water. And then what to do in response to that. There is a big thing here around education in schools. One of the things that we've asked for is just to go back over the RNLI's Float to Live campaign, which is basically, if you did get yourself into difficulty, how you tilt your head back, you just move your arms gently. It gives people time to come and rescue you and save you. But we do need to do that.
Well, we'll pop a link in the show notes to the campaign that you've talked about in case listeners want to pass that on to family and friends and schools and things. And very good luck with it, Lee. It's a really important campaign. Okay, so for our second story, something a little bit different, and I wanted to share one with you that I'd read in The Guardian that takes us a long way away from the UK to Nepal. But as ever, there's going to be crossovers kind of with here in the UK and other parts of the world. So the story is from the Bwlb district, which is a really remote part of the country. There's a population of around 120,000 people. They're really isolated from the rest of the country because of the road network. So they're basically self-sufficient for food production. And the kind of population have seen declining honey production and about a 50% loss in their bees over the last 10 years. That's interesting. What I think is really interesting then is the link between wider health impacts. So there was a study in the international journal Nature, I'll pop a link in the notes, by an ecologist at York University, a chap called Thomas Timberlake, and he spent a year tracking diets and crop yields and farming incomes and pollinator interactions with crops, which by the looks of things is literally counting bees on crops and looking at how much pollen they've got on them. But what he found is that pollinators were directly responsible for more than 20% of the residents' vitamin A, vitamin E and folate intake, as well as 44% of their farming income. And the thing that I thought was really interesting is this is the first time we've had a study like this that shows the direct link between pollinators and health. If you kind of widen that out, we've spoken previously on Planet Possible about neonicotinoids, which are chemicals that interfere with bees' nervous systems, and the UK government's got a temporary ban in place for those. But I thought it was a really interesting story because it's got links into food and health and climate change. But the final thing that was quite interesting is that 80% of the world relies on herbal medicine for primary healthcare. So you think about then the importance of pollinators in those wider networks. And I don't know about you, Lee, but this weekend my garden was full of bumblebees and I went down a little bumblebee rabbit hole on the internet to find out a bit more about them because I realised I didn't know very much. We have 24 species of bumblebee in the UK, which was a lovely fact that I'm now going to use as often as I can. But I just thought it was really interesting Because we've got some real challenges around this in the UK, which we know, but also how difficult but important it is to make the links between like our environmental systems and wildlife and then things like health outcomes. And I just thought it was a really interesting story. I would love to hear any thoughts you've got on it, really.
I mean, I love it. I mean, over the last few weeks, the kind of bee network I've talked about is much more about Greater Manchester, but we're not going down that path right now, I don't think. I think that's incredible. I mean, when I've done any research into bees in the past, and I have done a little bit, it was more about the significance that they play in terms of the global economy. We've known for a long time just how important they are in terms of making sure that we are healthy, the food chain continues to work. I think it's incredible that we've got some research now that actually proves categorically that link between bees and human health and the importance of them. And we need to take absolute heed on that and focus on that, because I can't imagine the impact we would have if we continue to see the decline that we're seeing at the moment. Yet hugely important. I've seen what you've done to your house recently in terms of your wildflowers and your suds. And as you say, you've had so many different insects come and visit this last weekend. It's incredibly important. I do think though, Niki, and what I've started to see a lot more is an understanding and a cultural shift towards making sure that we protect our insects and we protect bees. I know that species, as you know, are dying out 100 times the normal evolutionary rates of extinction at the moment. And that is absolutely shocking. But I do take some degree of peace of mind that when I visit schools, and I've visited every school in my constituency now, it's really, really often that the children talk to me about bees and they talk to me about the importance of them and the difference they make to our lives. So, as generations move on, I actually think, and as the science and the data and the evidence backs that up, we'll see a lot more around what we need to do to protect them.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I think you're right, actually. And we've gone from being, a bit frightened of them and things that we want to get rid of to perhaps encouraging them a little bit more.
I am still not a big fan of wasps, though.
But they pollinate cocoa. So I feel like you have to love them for the chocolate, don't you? So... Brilliant. Right, so for our next story, and the third and final one, I wanted to think a little bit with you about climate and energy, and you'll be aware, obviously, that the UK government set a target of an 87% cut in carbon emissions by 2042. So for listeners, just to bring you up to speed, we have a legally binding target here in the UK, which we set in 2008, of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And by law, the government has to legislate for emissions caps every 5 years on a strict timetable. They set a budget, and those are set by the Independent Climate Change Committee. That's currently chaired by Piers Forster, who's joined us previously on Planet Possible. And they've set out the 7th carbon budget. And so the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, has said that the government will accept the advice of the Climate Change Committee. And so for the period 2038 to 2042, we have an 87% cut. It's a really difficult time, Lee, to hold the line politically around the environment. We've got pressure, particularly in the UK, from the right, so Conservatives and Reform, who argue that we should increase oil and gas extraction from the North Sea. And the Conservative Party energy spokeswoman Claire Coutinho said that this target will make us, I quote, weaker, poorer, and send everyone's energy bills even higher. I would love to hear your reflections.
It's a weird one, this, isn't it? Because quite often governments are accused of not being strategic enough, not looking longer term, not making sure that we put things in place now that will help us in 10, 15, 20, 30 years' time, that we're not thinking about future generations, you're only thinking about 5-year periods. And actually with this, we are thinking longer term, we're setting clear milestones. And yes, that is always a difficult choice because lots of things come from external pressures all the time and influences. But ultimately, there are times when you do need to stick to the plan as best as you possibly can and get to those targets that you've set out to achieve. That requires more determination, more resilience, more focus than there's ever been required. But if you think about what that achieves for us and for our future generations in particular, it means we've got a really great clean energy transition. It means we have homegrown power, so we're self-sustainable. We've seen over the last 5 years, well, this last year, a second fossil fuel shock in 5 years, which has absolutely impacted the economy. It's sent prices absolutely soaring. We do need to be self-sustaining and move towards that. It gives us greater security, which ultimately, if you're producing your own energy, you should start to see bills start to reduce, which is exactly what people need in their pockets on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, it gives us that credibility on a world stage because we're doing everything we can to stick to the Paris Agreement. So it's absolutely the right thing to do. And for me, it's the right thing to do in terms of jobs and job security as well, because moving with our clean energy transition is going to create an extra 400,000 jobs in the next few years. We know it already employs around about 1 million people. That sector, we have to continue to fight for this, and we have to continue to transition. Now, what I would say, Niki, to all of those people that talk about fossil fuels and continuing, we are still drilling and pumping oil from the sea 24/7 at the moment with the licenses that we have. And that will continue alongside in parallel to the transition. So for me, it's just the sensible thing to do, and it's the right thing to do for the future of the country.
Do you think that we've got a sufficiently clear plan? Because 87% in essence 16 years, that is a massive transition, big target. What do you think?
I mean, there is a plan set out. When you think about the proposals that's been put forward as part of the 7th Carbon Budget, they go through the Environmental Audit Committee, they've been through the Climate Change Committee and supported and endorsed them. And of course, the Minister takes that forward. But if you look at that plan, there's a few things in there. One's around electrification, everything from looking at sustainable aviation fuels, massively important for me right now when I'm looking to reopen an airport in Doncaster. I want to make sure that, yes, we have flights from there. The demand for flights is just continuing to increase all the time, actually. But what that actually means then in reality is that we do need to find ways to reduce carbon impact from airplanes. So sustainable aviation fuel is a big part of that. There is a whole piece around peatlands and restoring our peatlands and planting more woodlands. That actually is the thing that's worth about £50 billion in nature benefit to the area. And then, of course, the other thing is just increased efficiency. What we need to do is make sure that we start to look at active travel, different types of transport mode. The modernisation of our airspace is happening as we speak for the first time in absolute decades because that's grown organically. But we're looking at cycling. And only this weekend, when I went to the Trooping of the Colour, so many cyclists using the cycle lanes in London. It was just absolutely phenomenal. So we need to just continue that. So yes, there is a plan in place. As new innovation comes online, we will start to take that on board as well. But it's important that we start to push that transition as fast and as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Lee. And I guess, from my perspective, it's great to hear that there is a plan. I think, our job is to keep holding the government's feet to the fire around making sure we stick to it. But great to hear that there is a plan. That is all we've got time for, unfortunately. But thank you for bringing such interesting stories, Lee. Thank you to you for joining us on this episode. If you don't already, then subscribe to Planet Possible wherever you get your podcasts to never miss an episode. And if you want to follow up on the topics that we've discussed today or join our mailing list and be the first to hear about new episodes and guests, click the links in the show notes. Our next episode out next Thursday, I'm joined by author and former BBC Environment correspondent David Shukman, and we talked about how Britain is coping with fires and flooding and his new book, The Response. So until next time, all I need to say is a big thank you to my guest, Lee Pitcher MP. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you for having me, Niki.
That's it, everyone. Stay curious, look for connections and explore what's possible.